Very good morning, students. Welcome to your English literature class. Today, we are going to do the poem The Patriot, written by Robert Browning. So, students, by the end of the poem, you will be able to explain meanings of difficult words as used in the context of the poem. You will be able to explain stanzas 1 till 3 in your own words. And you will be able to identify and understand literary devices used in the poem. Now, students, The Patriot is a dramatic monologue, which means it is a type of lyric poem in which a single person who is not the poet utters the speech in a specific situation that makes up the whole of the poem. It is in fact long speech by a speaker who addresses someone whose presence is felt though he or she utters no word. So students, here the speaker of the poem is a patriot. The poem is a monologue of this patriot speaker who narrates his tale to us as he is being taken to the scaffold to be executed publicly for his misdeeds. He tells us of his situation, how he was once well loved by everyone and how he is now despised by the same people. Now, students, let us understand the meanings of the difficult words of stanza 1. Muttle, a sweet-smelling flower. Like mad, in great enthusiasm. Heave, breathe. Sway, rise and fall. Church spires, tall pointed structures on the top of church buildings. A year ago, it happened only a year back. Now students, let's read stanza 1. It was roses, roses all the way, with myrtle mixed in my path like mad. Now students, the poem starts with the patriot describing an event, a grand public welcome that took place a year ago on that very same day. He is recalling the past and he builds a picture for us as he remembers that day. His walking path was covered with lots and lots of rose petals with myrtle mixed in them. The path was decorated with these flowers for him. Now students, read the next line. The house roofs seemed to heave and sway. Though here students, people standing on the roofs of their houses cheered for him as he passed by. They were overjoyed to see him. The church spires flamed, such flags they had a year ago on this very day. So here students, in the last two lines, the spires of the church, pointed tapering roofs and similar buildings were covered with flaming flags. So here students, the patriot is seen as a public hero in this stanza, who is greeted with much love and affection by the crowd. Now students, let's understand the symbolisms. Roses in this stanza symbolize the welcome with respect, honor and passion. Myrtle symbolize purity, love, innocence and generosity. Spires, symbols for hopeful gestures and strength. Now students, let us understand the literary devices. So first is, it was roses, roses all the way. Now students, underline this line. Now here, In this line, it is a metaphor. Now, what do you mean by metaphor, students? Metaphor is a figure of speech in which a comparison between two different things is implied but not clearly stated. The use of roses symbolizes people's love and affection towards the patriot. Now, here, students, one thing more. In metaphor, two things or persons are compared without using the words as and like. Now refer to the second literary device. With metal mixed in my path like mad, the church spires flamed, such flags they had. Now students, here in these two lines you can see we have used alliteration. Now again the question arises, what do you mean by alliteration? Alliteration is the occurrence of the same sound at the beginning of adjacent or closely connected words. As you can see in the first line, the consonant sound of M, and in the second line, you can see the consonant sound of F in flamed and flags. Let's proceed further. Read the lines. It was roses, roses all the way. With myrtle mixed, the church spires flamed. Now here, students, here it is a visual imagery in these lines. Now what do you mean by visual imagery? Visual imagery stimulates the sense of sight. Next, the house roofs seem to heave and sway. Now here, students, the poet has used a personification. Now what do you mean by personification? Personification means attributing human qualities to a non-living thing. Now here, students, the roofs of the houses have been given the human characteristic of heaving and swaying. Then the next literary device, the house roofs swaying with people in excess to have a glimpse of the patriot. Now students, here the poet has used kinesthetic image. Now kinesthetic image means when we talk about a thing in motion. Now here you can see the poet has used the kinesthetic image when he was talking about the people on the house roofs. Now students, proceed with stanza number 1 explanation. The patriot recalls how he was welcomed a year ago when he came back after his grand victory. His path was strewn with fragrant roses. The people were mad in their zeal and enthusiasm. The church towers blazed with victory flags. But the scene has drastically changed after a year. So let's proceed further, students. Now, let's start with the word meanings of stanza 2. Broke into a mist with bells means church bells rung to welcome the patriot. Rocked, shook, repels, hateful, yonder, that. Stanza 2. The air broke into a mist with bells. The old walls rocked with the crowd and cries. Now here, students, in the second stanza of the poem, the speaker continues narrating the old story from the same day a year ago. He describes the event to the readers. People were rejoicing by ringing bells, and the entire atmosphere was thick with its noise. The old walls rocked with the crowd and cries. So here, students, people were standing on some kind of old structure and cheering for the patriot with their shouts rocking the walls. Had I said, good folk, mere noise repels, but give me your son from yonder skies, they had answered, and afterward what else? Now the Patriot says, if he had asked the public for anything, even the most expensive things on which their life depended, or if he had asked them to give him the sun from yonder skies, they would have readily given it to him. They would have then asked him what else he wanted. Such great was his image. So we can see the excitement of the people at the sight of the speaker. The poet is trying to establish the kind of popularity the speaker had through this stanza. Now students, let's understand the literary devices in the second stanza. So in the first line, the air broke into a mist with bells, and in the line, with the crowd and cries. Now these two lines shows auditory imagery. Now what is the meaning of auditory imagery, students? It stimulates the sense of hearing. Then in the line, the old walls rocked. Here the poet uses kinesthetic imagery. Let's proceed further. In the line, but give me your son from yonder skies, they had answered, and afterward, what else? Now students, here in this line, the poet has used hyperbole. Hyperbole refers to exaggerated statements not to be taken literally. Here in this poem, the patriot, when asked the crowd to give him the sun, they answer, and afterward what else? So it is as if they would literally bring the sun for him at that moment. This thus is a hyperbolic expression here. Now students, in the same lines the poet has used metaphor for part. Let's read the explanation of stanza 2. The whole atmosphere resounded with the sound of church bells rung in honor of the hero just a year ago. The crowd surged with joy. The patriot appreciated the enthusiasm of the people. If he had demanded from them something impossible like the sun from the sky, they would have granted him. They would have asked him what else he desired. Such was the time just a year ago. Now students, note down the meanings of the words resounded, echoed, and surged, moved suddenly and powerfully forward or upward. Now students, let's proceed further and understand the difficult word meanings of stanza 3. Alack, alas, leaped at the sun, tried to do the impossible, not, nothing, harvest, reward, a year is run, a year has passed. Now let's read stanza number 3. Alack, it was I who leaped at the sun to give it my loving friends to keep. Now students, in the third stanza of the poem is the speaker's discourse on what all he did for his country. Now students, note down the mythological tale. The poet begins by using the mythological tale of Icarus and Daedalus. Icarus was the son of the great inventor Daedalus. The story revolves around the escape of these two men from a high tower where they were held prisoners. They escaped the tower by making wings out of bird feathers and wax. Icarus was so taken aback with the ability of flight that he flew too close to the sun, which caused the wax in his wings to melt and his eventual fall, which killed him. Now let's read first the next lines. Not man could do have I left undone, and you see my harvest what I reap. This very day now a year is run. Now here students, just like Icarus, the speaker admits that he too was overly ambitious and leaped to the sun. He did everything he could have done to make things right. Despite this, he is facing his undeserved end. The terms harvest and reap are closely seen as common metaphors for deeds. He says it has been a year since that day. Here, the poet ends the speaker's flashback. So let's understand the literary devices related to stanza 3. First, the act of leaping at the sun. Now here students, the act of leaping at the sun, the poet has used kinesthetic imagery and we have already discussed its meaning. Next, alack, it was I who leaped at the sun to give it my loving friends to keep. Now students, here the poet has used allusion, which means referring to some person, incident, etc. from the past. It may be a reference to mythology, literature, history, culture, or religion. And as you have already read, the poet has alluded to the mythological story of Icarus. Third literary device, and you see my harvest what I reap. Now here again students, you can see that the poet has used a metaphor in this line, as the patriot deeds have been referred to as harvest and the consequences have been referred to as reaping. So students, let's read the explanation of stanza 3. The patriot says that he tried to do the impossible for the pleasure of his admirers. He did his best. He did whatever he could do for his countrymen. But what reward had he got? Is this the reward he is getting from his people? In a sad tone, the patriot feels that people have forgotten all that he had done for them. So students, this is all about our today's class. Your homework is, do the homework given in your SNAP homework. Thank you students. Have a nice day.